His office at Oxford was still exactly as he'd left it. Books on the shelves, papers on the desk. A half-finished cup of tea, according to one colleague who walked in expecting to find him there. Dr. Michael Westerer, one of the most respected ancient language researchers in Britain, simply wasn't. No resignation letter, no farewell lecture, no goodbye, just absence where a man used to be. We started pulling on this thread the way any investigator would. Career trajectory first. Westerer wasn't someone who burned out quietly. He was, by all accounts, at the absolute peak of his professional life in late 2019. A multi-year translation project, the kind that defines careers, had just reached completion. That should have been the moment of triumph. Publications, recognition, the academic circuit. Instead, nothing. His colleagues, when pressed on record, offered confusion. Careful, measured confusion, the kind that sounds rehearsed. So we mapped the timeline. The translation finished. 6 months passed. And then Westerer was gone. Now, 6 months is long enough to be a coincidence. People have crises. Burnout is real. A personal collapse unrelated to any research project is entirely possible. The rational explanation sits right there, clean and available. Except the silence didn't stop with him. No publication followed, no peer review, no summary findings, a years-long translation effort, and the academic record shows nothing on the other side of it. That's not burnout, that's erasure. Which forces the question we haven't answered yet. What was inside that tablet? And why was it so difficult to read in the first place? The resin had done its job almost too well. For decades, conservators at the British Museum handled this tablet with a single directive: do not disturb it. The protective seal that kept the clay from crumbling also kept everything written on its surface from being read. A message preserved so thoroughly, it became, in practical terms, invisible. That's the paradox we're dealing with. The very thing that saved this tablet also silenced it. So, how do you read something you cannot touch? In 2019, the answer came from an unexpected direction. A team of researchers brought in multispectral imaging technology, the same class of systems developed for NASA to analyze planetary surfaces from orbit. Instruments built to read the composition of distant worlds, now aimed at a fragment of ancient clay sitting in a basement in London. The process, when you understand it, is almost difficult to believe. Beams of light, invisible to the human eye, pass through the resin layer entirely, as if it isn't there. And beneath it, the symbols carved into the clay absorb and reflect those wavelengths differently. The text doesn't just become readable, it blooms, like watching a photograph develop in a darkroom, except the image is 4,000 years old. What emerged was not simple. The tablet carried Akkadian text, but layered over older Sumerian logograms beneath it, a language written inside another language, like primitive binary code carved in stone. Two systems of meaning, nested deliberately, one on top of the other. That detail is worth sitting with, because a scribe who writes in two layered languages isn't recording casually. They are constructing something meant to be found and decoded in a specific order. The technology to read it only existed in 2019. The Sumerians wrote it 4,000 years ago, and what that text was actually pointing at, that question is still waiting for us. There is a question that keeps surfacing the deeper we go into the Sumerian record. Not a fringe question, Not a philosophical one, a purely investigative one. How did they know? The Sumerian King List, a historical document treated by scholars as a genuine administrative record, opens with a phrase that should stop every serious researcher cold. Kingship was lowered from heaven, not elected, not inherited, not seized, lowered from above. On its own, that reads as mythology, poetic language, the kind of origin story every ancient culture invents to legitimize authority. Except the Sumerians didn't stop there. Their cylinder seals, carved in stone, not written from memory, depict the solar system with the sun at its center. Every planet in its correct orbital position. A heliocentric model of our solar system, documented in ancient Mesopotamia 4,000 years before Copernicus arrived at the same conclusion through decades of careful observation. That is not mythology. That is data. And then there is their agriculture. Grain hybridization so sophisticated, so precisely engineered for the specific flood cycle conditions of the Tigris and Euphrates basin that archaeologists have found no developmental record leading up to it, no trial and error period, no primitive precursor crops. The knowledge simply appears, fully formed. Which brings us to a concept the Sumerians recorded explicitly: the me, described in their own texts as discrete packages of civilizational knowledge, transferable, deliverable, technology bundled and handed down. We accept their mathematics. We accept their astronomy. We call their engineering revolutionary. So why, when they tell us exactly where all of it came from, do we call that part fiction? And perhaps more urgently, if this knowledge arrived from somewhere else, what was the arrangement? What did it cost? The Sumerian texts don't describe the return of the Anunnaki the way a religion describes the coming of a god. They describe it the way an operations manual describes a scheduled inspection. That distinction matters, because the language, even in translation, is clinical, procedural. The being called Adamu, the first genetically modified worker being, is documented not as a miracle of creation, but as a product, a labor unit, engineered for a purpose. And in the same texts that record his creation, there is a passage that has troubled every serious translator who has reached it. The harvest follows the planting. That's the phrase, not metaphor, not poetry, a statement of sequence. And when you read it alongside the accounts of the Igigi, the Watchers, described as a monitoring class stationed in Earth's orbit, the sequence becomes something else entirely. Something that sounds less like ancient religion and more like a program running toward a scheduled endpoint. Now, the rational counter-argument is available, and it deserves to be heard. These could be allegories, cultural memories of natural disasters, floods, famines, encoded in divine language because that was the only framework ancient minds had to process catastrophe at scale. That explanation is clean, reasonable, widely accepted. The Book of Enoch carries the same framework. The Dead Sea Scrolls echo it. The Akkadian flood narratives repeat the structure almost word for word across centuries and civilizations. When the same operational sequence appears in texts that never touched each other, separation, cleansing, a signal from the sky, you stop calling it allegory. You start asking what the signal was. The texts agree it was astronomical. A celestial event, specific enough to calculate, specific enough that someone 4,000 years ago felt the need to record it in a language buried inside another language. What conjunction were they waiting for? The conjunction the tablet describes is precise. Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars aligned in Aquarius, not approximately, not symbolically. A specific, calculable configuration that modern astronomy can verify or disprove with complete certainty. So we ran it, and the result is not ambiguous. The next occurrence of that exact conjunction, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars in Aquarius, falls in the year 2029. A tablet written 4,000 years ago encoded a date that lands on our calendar. That is not interpretation. That is not mythology dressed as science. That is an astronomical fact, independently confirmed. Which brings us immediately back to Westerra. Because this is what he found. This is what waited on the other side of that years-long translation effort. And this, we now believe, is what he could not publish. Not because the date was wrong, but perhaps because the date was right. The rational counterargument deserves its moment. Conjunctions recur. Celestial mechanics are cyclical. 2029 is simply the next iteration of a pattern any ancient astronomer could have extrapolated forward. The Sumerians embedded a long-range astronomical calendar, a cultural survival mechanism, and we are reading intention into mathematics. That explanation is clean, available, reasonable. And then there is this. On April 13th, 2029, a 370-meter asteroid designated Apophis will pass closer to Earth than our own satellites. Not a theoretical proximity. A documented, confirmed flyby, tracked by modern observatories, verified by independent institutions, already on the record. The same year, the same window. The tablet named it. The sky confirms it. What we cannot confirm, what Westerra apparently could not say aloud, is what the tablet claims that date means. And whether something, right now, is already on its way.